Are you watching any
I've
any
never
vlogs,
seen
any
it.
vlogs, any podcasts, any
Mga abroad.
talaga? Sinong pinapanood
Megyn
mo?
Kelly, Dave
Okay.
Rubenstein. Conservative eh. Ayoko ng mga Dems.
Hindi, but ibig sabihin, but it's all that? I mean, is there any particular
Yeah.
content that...
Yun nga. Sino ba? Douglas Murray, I love him. Jordan Peterson.
And you watch it
Gusto ko
on...
ng mga discussions. YouTube. Oh,
YouTube.
I really like the discussions.
I
wish that the level of discourse could be that high here, no? Takas eh. Pero I realize also that it really requires extensive reading. And you have to read really, really fast. I mean, kasi they talk about a book that was just released last week and nabasa na nila and you're talking here, really, 700-page books, no? Parang, and they're so very detailed about it. And then they can synthesize the whole thing in 3 or 4 sentences. It's amazing to me.
But I think it's also a function of feeling ko it's also a function of the medium. Which is why I like podcasts.
Yeah. No,
Kasi,
I do too.
hindi, kasi walang time pressure.
There's no time constraint.
Diba?
Yeah, and there's even no topic constraint. I mean, so let the discussion go where it may. Parang sometimes it meanders, but you can always edit it later if you want a shorter cut, diba? So I like it.
At saka, dead air, and for that matter, even long pauses,
Yes.
is not evil.
Yeah,
unlike
it's
sa traditional media, di ba? Na
We're so naughty. We only choose
Hindi, tsaka sa traditional
Yes,
media, di ba? Parang not only do you have to slot into a particular, a specific time, di ba?
Yeah.
Whether 30 minutes, 1 hour, 45 minutes, 50. Kailangan pasok doon. But every single beat has to be filled in by some kind of noise. Kaya I always tell people...
Hindi naman, meron namang pregnant pause, but you have to be really sure that even that dead air actually is not dead. It's just silent. And you're looking at the face. So to me rin, on TV, shots are like half the story. And unfortunately nga, many of our cameramen are not really cinematographers, if I may put it that way, di ba? Kasi parang it really takes a certain involvement, no, not a certain, an involvement in the story that even for a cameraman, a videographer, parang he has to know what the story is about so that when an interview is being done, even if it's just a fire victim, di ba? You have to be able to capture the expression of the face, and sometimes they can't express themselves. And especially when you're in a panic mode, like, your house just got burned down, tapos humihikbi ka, di ba? Hindi mo, di ba yun yung drama, which you cannot capture naman in a vlog, because a vlog is so set up.
Katulad nito.
Katulad nito, yeah. Di ba? Parang, and even the vlogs where, the celebrity or the host goes to a house and then says, oh, ito siya with her hair down. You already know that's not really her. I mean, in truth.
Sabi mo kanina, ang pinapanood mo, mga discussions lang. Kung nanonood ka rin pala ng mga nagbubukas ng bahay nila sa
Pasilip-silip. Pero alam mo yun, if it's a 10-minute vlog, I will probably watch only 2-3 minutes. Oo, TV mode pa rin
habit
ako
mo to. Morning, evening.
Yeah, medyo na-addict
Ito,
na
I like this question. I've tended to ask this now quite regularly. No. Pagka nasa YouTube ka, hindi yung mga hinahanap mo, but what does your algorithm feed you? Na nagugulat ka na finid sa'yo, and more importantly, nagugulat ka na, uy, oo nga, no, type ko pala to.
Oo. Hindi ako nagugulat. Nagagalingan nga ako eh.
Okay, so give me an example. What does your algorithm feed you?
For example, I mean, I know this is so not apolitical, but for example, I'm very pro-Israel in this war. So they keep feeding me Israel stuff. And I really appreciate that also. And then I also know, but parang I learned that if I were an American, I would probably be Republican. Yon. And then, actually, you know what amazes me about, well, about AI is sometimes I really think there's a big brother. I'm really convinced.
It's already there.
Because,
Yeah, but the
I
algorithm is-
just mention it. I just mention it while my YouTube is on. I mention it to someone. Panoorin mo to. See what he's talking about. Mamaya meron ng... This was exactly what I was talking about earlier. You know, I'm really convinced that there's Big Brother. Napapraning ako, Robbie. Do you know that I can't even step out of my walk-in closet without clothes?
Again, you cannot,
Kasi
dahil feeling mo,
feeling ko somebody's watching
no,
me.
wherever your phone is.
Yes, and somebody's listening in on my conversation, even with my kids. It's not, in the beginning, it was like, I was just chalking it up to coincidence lang yan. Pero ngayon, hindi na talaga. Ang galas eh. One time, I was just talking about landscaping, looking for a landscape architect. Kasi I bought a little farm
Saan?
in Balayan, where the prices are still low. But yun. And then the next thing I knew, pinifeed na ako ng mga landscape, ng mga farms. Oh my. Kinikilabutan ako when I think about it. Parang talagang there's no more privacy.
But to your point about...
Buti na lang, I have nothing to hide.
Oh nga, you're an open book nga. Speaking of which, you start with, look, this is what I believe in. It's good that you're, I appreciate that you're not only self-aware, but also very candid na, look, sa totoo lang, these are my beliefs, this is where I stand, and therefore, ito yung mga finifeed din sa akin.
Yeah.
But on the other side of that, don't you get concerned as a journalist also that you are your own proof of an echo chamber.
Yes.
You are your own proof
Yes.
that, you know, if you are out there
Yes.
with what you believe in,
Yes.
I will keep
Yes.
getting, and then multiply that by 7 billion people on Earth, and then
Yeah.
it's no wonder that people get polarized.
Yes, but that's also why I don't have a vlog. I could start one, but I don't have it.
Why? I don't follow.
Because I'm not really public about it, unless I'm asked, like in this.
Yeah.
And I'll just be myself. That's one. Number two, I'm not yet retired, but I should be soon at my age.
Okay.
And I think that I'm entitled to voice out my opinions then.
Okay.
So I think this is a good place to start. I mean, so if they fire me, there's not much opportunity cost
Okay. But do you
left for me. So,
But
alam
do
mo
you look
yun?
forward to that? I mean, the
Yes.
time when
I actually
diba?
do. Because the only reason I hold back, Robbie, is not even for my reputation as a journalist, but for News 5. And I don't want people to think, ang hepe naman yan, bias naman, galit naman sa amin yan, right? So parang I hold back for the sake of the organization.
I mean, not that it would be weird,
Yeah.
but just to make it explicit, you do have biases. You do have your
Sino naman ang
and
wala?
kinukubli mo yan sa ngayon.
Ang tagal na. I've always, I was gonna say pretended. No, but that's your training eh. Probe pa ako. Ganun na kami. And from the very start, I remember, because I was an associate producer for Viewpoint of Don Puno. And our executive producer then, who was an American, she asked me about my political opinions. And I said, I do have political opinions, but I don't have to say what they are. Because it shouldn't matter when I write a story. I have to set that aside. And she really truly respected that about me. And it's always been let's just say my guiding principle in writing stories. Parang I have to be aware na where I stand on this story, and I have to be very careful that my slip doesn't show.
But it's never gotten to the point that you've had to inhibit yourself from any particular story. Was there ever a time na you actually told yourself or you told your principals na eto, I just can't touch this story.
Yes. Pag kaibigan ko, pag kilala ko, I say, wag na ako. Kasi, I disagree with her and I don't want to have to be the one to disagree with her. So you do it. Ganun. Mga ganun. Pero other than that, I really appreciate my time in Probe. In Probe, we were so OC about showing any form of bias or being ingratiated in any way. For example, ang rule namin is never interview during mealtime. Because when you go to a house during mealtime, they'll ask you if you've had lunch. And when the food is good, you'll be tempted to eat. And once you start eating, you know how Pinoys are? We don't eat quietly. We go, oh, ang sarap nito. Ang galing mo naman magluto. And before you know it, you're becoming friends with the very person that you're probably going to portray in a negative light. And they're going to think that, ang bastos nitong si pinakain ko ng lumpia akong napakasarap. Tapos tinitira ko.
Itong barbecue namin na sikat sa buong Dasmariñas.
No, really. So, naging rule namin yan. Never interview during meal times. Ganyan. That's talagang pag may nag-aabot ng envelope, kuhanan mo yan. Alam mo, para may proof talaga kami. And on cam, we really say, hindi po kami tumatanggap, pabalik ko po sa inyo to. And I'd like to think that we trained many a politician in dealing with the media and in telling them, look, the media is different now. You cannot get away with this. Yun, ang galing.
Although they have.
Well, there still are, but compared to before,
I remember times when I would attend a press conference and not even a politician, di ba? And then you're walking out and then pagbaba mo dun sa landing, literally somebody's standing there and namimigay. And it's literally an envelope.
Yes.
It's not even, it's not even a figure.
Robbie, I'm not
it's
going
not
to
even a
pretend
metaphor.
that I was clean all the way. When I was a new reporter and I was in RPN 9, and of course everything was was run by the government. Bago reporter ako, di ba? So tanggap lang ako ng tanggap. Because everybody else was on the take, And if you don't get, your camera crew,
That's right.
I can't agree with you, parang, ayoko na kasama.
Not to mention the entire beat. I
Yes.
remember when I was a police reporter, which literally means bagito ka,
Yes,
di ba?
yes.
So I was covering the Western Police District. One of the most awkward, at the same time welcome to Philippine press moments for me was yung mga mas nakakatanda and some of the reporters, particularly from the tabloids, and said, "Uy, lika, sama ka." Tapos sumakay na ako. Nandun kami sa likod ng owner type jeep. Di ba? Nakasakay ako
rin
dyan.
owner yung unang
Diba?
crew cab ko.
And then sabi ko, saan po ba tayo pupunta? O-orbit tayo. Di ba? O-orbit. Orbit meant na pupunta ka sa bawat
Iba-iba.
istasyon,
Yeah.
magmamano sila sa mga station commanders, di ba?
Superintendent, yes.
And then, basically, magmamano lang kayo and it's understood na bibigyan kayo ng pang-kape, pang-lunch,
Yeah.
pang-dinner,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Iisa-isahin yung and
Yeah.
they called it the orbit.
Okay.
Which was really just so awkward and at the same time, to your point, lalo na yung bago kang reporter, how do I get myself out of this without because these are the people who are going to guide me in the beat.
Right.
These are and all that aside, these are good journalists.
Yes.
These are very good reporters. They were better police reporters than I ever was. Ang dami nilang koneksyon, dami nilang, di ba? They need any information, and alam nila sinong interviewin. They know how to monitor the radio ng police. So, takbo ka agad kung kailangan. But at the same time, di ba parang, saan ako lulugar dito na,
It's really
na
hard.
hindi ako husgahan, na hinuhusgahan ko sila,
Yeah.
and therefore, pasuna ako dun sa beat.
And it's not even just your peers, Robbie. Because I'm sure even kasi di ba, sabi ko nga, it's really hard to strike a balance between being an objective journalist, I mean, as objective as you can possibly be, and at the same time cultivating the contacts and the sources, right? Because part of the cultivating is really, labas tayo, inuman tayo, o party tayo, o punta ako sa binyag ng anak mo. Pero di ba parang, when does the personal relationship end so that you can really start telling a story that's impersonal, that's just as unbiased as you possibly. It's hard. It's hard.
So how do you do it? Do you find that do you just turn on a switch? I mean, at the, let's say in the middle of an interview, are you able to do that? You just turn on a switch and say, teka muna, I'm gonna be, hindi naman asshole, but I'm gonna be, di ba, parang didiretsuhin ko to, I have to do this.
Yeah. But, there's a skill to it, because what you do is you actually soften your voice when you're asking a hard question. And you really do try to look as let's just say, empathetic, instead of looking like you're bullying him into an answer. It's also not productive to do that, because you have to gain their confidence.
That's true. Nung nag-start ka sa media, and I know, so parang, but nung nag-start ka sa media, did you ever imagine na aabot ka sa, where you are right now? There are only really 3 jobs on national networks that are heading the news desks of these national TV and broadcasting networks. How far is that from what you thought you would be nung una ka pumasok sa media?
A bit far, yes. I never really imagined that I would run a news organization. I was dreaming that I would be a news anchor. That I would get paid well. That I would have a new dress every day for free.
Okay. You're talking about somebody else.
Because those were the perks. And I know that everyone who wants to get into TV is after that. And they want to be a journalist, because being a journalist, especially for TV, has you can tick all the boxes. You become famous, you become quite rich, yes, and you have influence. Influence that even the most famous film stars won't have.
You
right?
wanted all of that. The influence.
Bakit naman hindi?
Hindi, because some people would be saying, I didn't do it for the money. I cannot say, maybe the influence, but all of those, or in that particular order?
I really liked it, because as a kid growing up, my idol was Jose Mari Velez. And I felt, ang tali-talino naman ito, ang sikat-sikat naman ito, because I could see him really, rubbing elbows on TV with the most powerful people. And then I just felt, well, I had good reading skills. I had a good voice then, not anymore, but I just,
What's wrong with your voice?
I lost my voice because I was heartbroken.
And then we'll get to that later. But ang point ko is, I like your voice because it's a signature voice.
Really?
No, seriously, di ba?
Pumipiyok-piyok.
Ang sa akin naman, yun naman na mahalaga, di ba? Pagka narinig mo to, alam ko kung sino yan nagsasalita.
That's true.
Di ba?
Tsaka, Robert Kennedy, we have the same disorder.
Robert Kennedy
Junior, itong
ito
tumatakbo
tumatakbo.
ngayon. Junior ba yung the third?
Ah.
Di ba ang sama ng voice niya?
It's a disorder?
Yes, it's called spasmodic dysphonia. Same here, same, but his is worse, no?
No, which means what? Where exactly is the
It's
disorder?
neurological. Somehow, my brain can't control, or rather is controlling what otherwise I should be consciously controlling. So it's trying to restrict the movements of my vocal cords. Even if I'm saying don't restrict it, it gets in the way. So it breaks on its own, it restricts on its own, ganyan.
But
There's no telling when. There's no telling when. It's a neurological
but you
disorder.
do newscast. You just did a very long sentence there, a very long passage.
Yeah.
People have seen you on TV. I don't think people have
Certain
ever...
situations, certain situations, like now, and certain words.
Hindi, pero
Trigger it.
sinong hindi pumipiyok at sinong hindi
No, but
nagbe-break?
it happens very often with me. That's why I speak in falsetto sometimes. Like now,
Okay,
I'm
like
speaking in
now.
falsetto.
Okay.
Because if I don't speak in falsetto, this is how it's going to be.
Okay.
See? So I just try to compensate by either speaking in falsetto, or I try to be, really booming about it. But that's not how we ought to be on TV.
I know from our one
Yeah,
interview we've had
the
a long time
podcast.
ago.
Yeah,
Meron po akong playlist ng buhay ko with
Yes.
Lucy
Galing
Cruz.
nun.
Hanapin niyo po yun sa Spotify.
should listen to
You
it.
should listen to that. But one story there is, sabi mo, you've always wanted to be a newscaster.
Yes.
Pero doon kinuwento mo, no, actually you wanted to be a singer.
Yeah, I wanted to be a singer, an actor, or, a newscaster, but I just wanted to be famous. The quickest way to fame. And they're not bad ambitions, right? But anyway, I wanted to be a newscaster.
Since bata ka pa? Bibo ka?
Bata pa ako.
Bibo ka na
Super
bata?
bibo ko, tsaka chismosa ako. I was like the gadfly of the little circle of friends that we had.
Hindi, pero ikwento mo eh. Kasi you not only wanted to be a singer,
Yeah.
for
And I
the
sang
record,
well.
you were in fact a singer.
Yes, I was with the new minstrels, believe it or not. Not.
Hindi, kwento mo ulit. You were
So-
once upon a time, a professional singer on stage.
Yes. So I was singing new minstrel songs, and those of, people of our age would know those songs. And then, I fell in love. I had a boyfriend then, and then we were together for 3 years. I mean, we were on for 3 years. We didn't live in, but and then one fine day I saw him with another girl who also happens to be, some sort of friend, barkada. I was so shocked when I saw them in a car together. So I went back to work in Broadcast City. I was already anchoring at that time. When I got there, I literally threw up. I mean, that was how broken I felt, that I threw up. I was trying to get the heartbreak out of my system, maybe, that I threw up. And then when I was doing the newscast, in the middle of the newscast, I actually started stuttering. Ganito. But it worse because I didn't know what it was, right? So I was reading the news. I was like, at ayon sa Pangulo, nothing was coming out on air. And then I paused and I said, ipagpapatuloy yan ni Joe Carlos. So I passed it to Joe Carlos and he started to read. And then in the next item, siyempre dapat ako na, di ba? So I started to read again. The same thing happened. In the middle of the news story, I started to, it's so hard. So I didn't finish the newscast and the producer said, take a break. And I said, I think I need to take a break. So I took a break for 2 weeks. When I returned, it was the same. And for many years, talagang I just stuttered. But, this is the
This was your voice
ito na yun.
condition na.
Yeah, ito na yun. But at that time, there was no diagnosis of that yet. Wala pa ng mga spasmodic dysphonia. Later na lang yun. So at that time, I didn't know what to do. But I kept on newscasting. Buti na lang wala pang social media noon. Can you imagine the bashing I would have gotten if there was Facebook then? But anyway, so I continued newscasting. One day, a viewer literally made a phone call to say, bakit pa ganyan si Lucy Cruz? Ba't ganyan ang boses niyan? Ang hirap niya panoorin, ganyan. So my boss, si Frankie Abaw, talked to me. And I knew that ang bait nun eh. Hindi niya lang masabi na, Lucy, I have to fire you. Before he could say it, you know what I said? Sir, I know, I'm really having a hard time. Pero sir, bigyan niyo ako ng trabaho. I don't want to leave broadcasting. I said, wala akong opening eh. Sir, gawin niyo na lang ako reporter. And he said, wala rin akong opening. Tsaka wala akong pangsweldo, walang budget. Sir, okay lang. I'll do it for free. He gave me a break. And I started
Ako rin naman,
reporting.
bibigay ko rin sa inyo kung wala ka sweldo.
Diba? No, but still, ngayon bawal yun. Ngayon bawal yun eh. But so he gave me a break. And that's when I learned how to really do news reporting. Doon ako natuto.
Salamat sa babaeng yan.
Oh, yeah. You see,
Baka po nakalimutan.
that's why my life verse is
babe.
Romans 8:28. All good things work for good for those who love Him. No, really, really. Because it all worked for good. You know, I always say those were the ropes that I learned in this time of great adversity. Honestly, that's how I started this journey to being a real journalist.
Kita niyo.
And who would have thought, look, di ba, I ended up being the head of a news organization instead of the face of.
Are there times that you regret it? Are there times that make you
Regret.
feel like, nah,
I
I should have
regret
been...
the loss of my voice. I really
Still?
do. Yes, because there's so much that I want to say, but what's happening now is I select the words I use. Because there are just some words that I find hard to say. Ngayon ko nga lang na-realize na may power talaga ang good voice. No?
Okay.
The same way that height has power. You know, all these are gifts actually. We just really need to tap them. But, well, I lost my voice. But I never lost my sense of story. Storyteller ako eh.
Yeah.
Oo.
And I do think that's a real value
Yes.
these days.
Yes,
diba? To be able to
absolutely.
tell a story.
Yes.
Do you feel that, speaking of influence, do you feel we're losing our influence? Tayo, parang our generation and the media as we knew
Yes.
it.
Yes,
talaga.
Robbie.
When
Yes.
when was the first time that you felt like, ay, totoo pala? Parang
When,
iba na,
yeah,
nagbago na.
when everybody started migrating, especially the young people, started migrating to social media. And unfortunately, they were migrating to the, anong tawag nila yun? Parang low-hanging fruits. Meaning yung mga madaling intindihin, mga nakaka-relate sila emotionally. Unfortunately, you can only go so far with your emotions. You're just going to have to make decisions at some point. You're just going to have to make a stand. You have to know exactly what the issues are so that you can express them and make your vote known. I don't know. People just don't realize what power they have. That's what, I always say, parang the more things change, the more things remain the same. And the way they were when I started as a journalist is still the way they are now, except that they're worse. They're like 10 times worse than they were during that time. Parang corruption is worse. And wow, the fake news. I mean, we didn't have that term then, but we knew then there was propaganda. That was the word. Now, it's not even propaganda. It's fake news. And you can't even tell anymore. Right now, there's deep fake pa. Grabe.
And you feel helpless in front of
I
it?
do to a certain extent. But more than feeling helpless, I feel frustrated. And I feel like all my 43 years as a journalist really didn't count for much. I thought in 1986 that, finally things were going to turn around. But they didn't. And I think that we squandered it. I really think we did. And I'm not blaming any set of people. I think we all as a people squandered it. I wonder sometimes whether we're really so tribal. No? I think we're really so tribal. We're just thinking about not even ourselves, but our families. Filipinos will say, hindi para sa akin yan eh. Para sa pamilya ko. But in many ways, what they don't realize is we're really still about ourselves, di ba? Our families, our loved ones, our friends. It's my country, it's our country. Wala tayong ganun. I don't know why. Why can't we be like Israel? Solid.
Hindi, but so saan tayo lulugar? Di ba, I mean, one of my early guests was McCoy Dubs.
Yeah.
And McCoy is an advocate now on fighting disinformation, diba? And I think he's such a crucial ally because he knows how to play social media. Diba? He's a content creator, he's
yeah.
an influencer. So
Yeah, maybe the future
unlike
belongs
our
to them.
generation, diba,
Yeah.
na parang I think the values are there, but at the same time, hindi naman natin parang I just had that conversation with Rico Hizon. Even Rico was saying, hindi ko maintindihan ng TikTok, di ba? Parang I can't be relevant in that
Yeah,
space. But
yeah.
I remember telling McCoy, Mark, di ba? Parang nararamdaman mo ba that bumaliktad yung mundo? And my example was when he walked into our building, dinumog siya ng mga tao natin, ng
Wow.
staff natin.
Grabe.
There was a time when you wanted to be an anchor. When it's the
Hindi nangyari.
anchors,
Never nangyari
hindi,
sa
diba? That it's the TV personalities who walk out of the building and dudumugin sa labas.
Yes,
Ito
yes.
baliktad. Siya yung galing sa labas, pumasok at dinumog siya ng mga
Nasa loob.
tao natin. And that was really for me an epiphany na bumaliktad na talaga yung mundo. We really are not the gatekeepers anymore. And to your point, it's not anybody's fault. But I do think there's that question of who's the gatekeeper now? And if the gatekeeper is
Good question.
hundreds, thousands of people, I guess there's something you can find value there. But at the same time, how do we get people to all look at the same issues? How do we get people to all look at the same, ano?
I think we will just really eventually self-destruct.
Akala ko naman may sasabihin kang,
Hindi, kasi parang I don't think that we will ever get over the divides. I really don't. And I think that social media is a...
no, but do you think during our time that we got past the divides?
No, there were divides. That's why I say nga parang nothing has changed. In fact, di ba, the more things change in the sense of environments changing, platforms changing, the more things remain the same.
But one
So
thing
it's
that
the
has
same thing, but
changed-
now it's the divides are deeper and wider.
Yeah.
Grabe. And
No, but you know one thing that has changed? One thing, the gatekeeping function has in fact changed because we were in fact gatekeepers.
yes.
Before, it was impossible for you. I don't care if you're a grade schooler, if you're a teenager with angst, if you're you could not avoid the news. If every newspaper had the same headline, di ba? Na si Erap, di ba? May Boracay Mansion sa Quezon City, di ba? Then you know that the whole country is going to be talking about that.
Yeah.
There was no avoiding it. You go home, everybody's watching news at the same time. Hindi ganun kadali lumipat ng channel. You go down for breakfast and you have, 3-4 headlines telling you itong mga issue. Ngayon, people can just totally avoid the news. Never mind who the gatekeeper is.
Yeah,
But that has
that's
definitely changed. Somebody can just say, I don't want
Yeah.
to have anything to do with any news, and I will just go to work, take care of my studies, diba? Kakayod ako para sa pamilya ko, and you can actually survive nowadays without
Or so
without
you
knowing
think.
what's happening. No, but
Yeah.
diba?
No, you're right. You're right. Yes, that's true. The audiences.
I'm not saying that you should keep us as the gatekeepers. That's not what I'm saying, diba?
But that's what's happening. That's what's
Diba?
happening. That's true. So what do you do? I don't know. Parang, I don't know. I don't know. And I think I'm veering toward that population. I'm becoming one of them in a sense. Also because, I hate to say this, but parang I feel like the news has become a template. Parang nagbabago lang yung mga pangalan, nagbabago lang yung mga circumstances, but we're all mouthing the same issues. Senate hearing after Senate hearing.
Yeah.
And then when the media stops talking about it, we also stop talking about it. I mean, everybody stops talking about it. It's all forgotten, and then so Yeah, has anything changed really? Wala rin naman eh, di ba? Ganun pa rin naman sila nun. I mean, it's not like everybody was watching the news, Robbie. No, I don't think so. There were so many people then who already hated the news
Oh,
and
but
they
you
didn't
can't,
care about
but
the
there
news.
was no avoiding it. That's the
No.
difference. There was no avoiding the fact na
But now
all
there's no
around
avoiding
me.
social media. It's the same.
Yeah, but you're not,
right?
you're
But not the
avoiding the
news.
topics. You're not
Yes.
watching the news.
Yes, you're not
diba?
watching the news. But ako rin, parang feeling ko nun, even though they couldn't avoid the news, they really also weren't taking the news to heart.
When the time comes that you hand over to new executives, new leaders in the newsroom, how would you look back on your career? And not only that, how would you look back on our craft? And what our generation did for news?
I don't think that I'll look back in the sense of leaving it all together and not doing. I see myself as continuing a brand of journalism, except probably in a different platform.
No, but I meant yung sinabi mo kanina na parang wala na, parang walang, parang
Yeah,
sometimes you
nothing's
question
changed.
nothing's changed.
Yeah.
You question the impact. Do you really feel that way?
Yes, I do question the impact, but it doesn't mean that I'm giving up on it. I will continue. I want to continue being part of the conversation. I feel also that that's a responsibility that's been put on me, and it's a lifetime one. You cannot just say, I'm retired now. I really don't care what happens to the country. I will have to do it for the sake of my own children. That's the tribal part of me. And for the sake of the country, which I think every Filipino ought to be really thinking seriously about.
Alam mo, I had this conversation recently with a friend, our generation also, and he reminded me of something that we did way back when we just finished college. So we were still idealistic and so on. And then it boiled down to a question of, by the year 2020, di ba, tayo na yung adults. So
Right.
tayo na yung either tayo na yung makikredit or we take all the blame. We cannot blame anybody else
Right.
anymore.
Right.
Diba? So sabi ko, so how do you think we did? So he's very cynical. Sabi niya, I think we failed. And then I said, do you think, and this is my question to you, do you think much of our cynicism is there because we're looking at the politics? But if you actually broaden the question to other aspects in the national life,
Like what?
okay, good question. Ito kasi regardless of how people feel about it, we have an RH law. We have laws that frankly got past not just politics, but the Catholic Church. Diba? We never thought that kayang banggain yun. You have the poverty rate has actually improved.
Has it really?
It does. Diba? Parang we have lifted people out of poverty. You look at the empowerment of local government units. You won't attribute all of that to media per se, but keeping that on the agenda, I think there have been improvements in policies on environment and natural resources. I think the air is cleaner now, believe it or not. Young people will never believe what Pasig looked like Pasig River looked like when we were growing up. You could not only see it, you could smell it from Guadalupe Bridge. No? So, and ang point ko lang is, if you look, and I do think as imperfect and as handicapped as women still are, that we have made strides. I think we've made strides also when it comes to the advocacies of LGBTQ communities. I think we've made strides when it comes to having to consult indigenous peoples and local communities whenever there's a big ticket problem. Ayun lang yung point ko. No? It goes back to my question. Do you think that we have to remind ourselves na it's not always politics that is the single barometer? Because, diba, that's what people always point to. Na my proof that nothing has improved it always goes back to national politics. But if you widen the scope, there's more than one silver lining. Do you think that much of our cynicism and our sense of frustration has to do with the fact that usually when we ask that question, politics ang tinutukay natin?
Yes, that's true. That's also true. But then even
When you say, for example, walang nagbago,
Oo.
diba? Aren't you in fact talking about national politics and not other things?
Yes, but not just. I wouldn't say I'm just talking about politics. I'm really also talking about whether values have improved. I don't think they have improved. I really don't. I think the fact that there are more broken marriages now speaks volumes to me. The fact that people have chosen to not get married, there are more and more of those. The fact that the quality of education is so bad that we're at the bottom, the very bottom of all rankings. I mean, these are my measures. Education is something that I feel I ought to do something about because I fancied myself a good trainer and a good teacher. And I'm so frustrated that our kids can't even express themselves in either Filipino or English. Lalo na math and science. Well, maybe I'm speaking as a language skilled person. And I find math and science so much harder, but in terms of the art, of course, there's, diba? But I'm just saying, Robbie, as far as basic communication, that to me is a great measure. If you can't even communicate what's in your heart, how can you advocate for any kind of real change? At the end of the day, it's really about influence. And those of us who know where we ought to go, at the very least, we can agree through communication and be able to relay that to the future generation so that they too can form their own opinions and make their own stand toward what is eternally, to me, and classically right. And there ought to be only one truth. I hate this debate over whether this is, it's neither right nor wrong. I think that's
like
what's
I said,
saving Filipino culture, honestly. The fact that we still hold to eternal beliefs, the fact that many of us are still God-fearing is a major hindrance to going over the deep end, to me.
Yeah. And I respect that, which is why, for me, I'm not here to debate that. Diba? But I do think that there are people who, even to that point, that we are God-fearing and we are... there are people who would say, no, there's virtue to heresy. There is virtue to not being God-fearing. There is virtue to growing up not being staunchly Catholic or staunchly Christian or staunchly Muslim.
Yeah.
In the same way that these are the same people who will say that we've also seen the evils of being dogmatic. We've also seen the evils of being fundamentalist on certain things. Diba?
Yeah. Agree. Yes.
But don't you feel that this is all? I agree. It's painful, but don't you feel that this is part of catharsis on everybody's part? I mean, even the division. Don't you feel like sometimes it's not that it has caused division? Maybe it's that there was always division. There were always disagreements.
Of course,
and
yes.
now it's just being surfaced. And now that it's being surfaced, we all don't know how to handle it.
That's what I mean. So they've been there, but at that time, there was only a small part of the thinking population, let's just say, of the citizenry, let's just say, that thinks that, and they weren't even loud. But now they have become louder and louder and noisier and noisier. And those who have not really settled in their minds where they stand are now being influenced in large part by the louder voices. And in the meantime, the tables have been turned around. And those of us who are conservative and still hew to traditional values are now being, well, cowed, no? Into, kasi may mga terms na, like we're now all being very politically correct, di ba? So we're being very careful about our terms. We can't even use certain terms anymore, but those very terms are the heart of the matter. But you can't even say it because if you speak it out, you're going to be branded as what? Whatever, phobic, something.
No, I get that. I mean, and you know, unfair is unfair, and I do believe that bullying is wrong, di ba? You don't win points by bullying, or you don't win points just because you are the loudest and the most unreasonable and the most unmoving and the most stubborn, di ba? But I also do have empathy for people who say that, you know, I may be speaking out now, and sometimes I may be loud, but remember, I'm coming from a world where I was the one who was stifled.
Yes.
When I was the one who was bullied.
Sure.
When I was the one who was, bawat bukang bibig ko, I'm just trying to share who I am.
Sure.
And I'm the one being judged. So, ang point ko lang
There's
is...
been a correction already. My point is this.
No,
diba?
but my point is that correction is, it's not yet done. Diba? Parang isn't it ongoing
It's
and therefore
overcorrecting, in fact. I mean, you know, you're already seeing in the Western countries, diba, this movement toward DEI, where a certain
Just DEI, sorry.
diversity, equality, and inclusivity. Dapat X%, diba, meron kang distribution of races. There has to be Asian, it's not meritocracy anymore. And even in jobs, Robbie, there's been so much overcorrection already abroad. I'm so sure that it will come here. And I'm just saying that, all I'm saying is this. Yes, you have a point. There are people who will disagree with the conservatives, of course. But the point is, everybody ought to talk about it, and everybody ought to agree that this is acceptable to all of us. Eh, hindi na ngayon.
Yeah, but given that it's impossible to agree, diba? For everybody, diba? There will always be those tensions. So I do think,
wag naman
I
yung
don't know,
overriding.
kasi ako, I have to check myself, diba? Parang I might nod along and say, now, okay, yeah, that's true. I've known the world to be like this. But I also ask myself, maybe it's my stature, it's my privilege in life, not having to have seen things through the lens and the life experience that people have gone through, whether they're gay, they're of a particular minority, a minority in the United States or Europe, or a marginalized sector, the religious, or Muslims,
exactly.
di ba, sa totoo lang, di ba, malakas ang biases, malakas ang ano, and it's one thing for us to say they've always been around us. It's another thing for them to say iba pa rin, you still don't know what we're going through. And that's not to deny the conservative values that people are also trying to express. All I'm saying is, I think where we are is in a world where, yes, everybody now, I think thankfully, can now speak and advocate for themselves.
Yes.
I do also believe that there is a learning moment for everybody on all sides.
Right.
That it's not just about speaking for yourself. It's not just about listening to other people. It's learning how to speak for
There's
yourself.
a key word.
Diba? Learning how to speak
and
for
really
yourself and
also-
learning how to listen really hard.
Yeah, learning. I mean, people have to be willing to learn.
Yeah.
Learn about the alternative opinion. Learn about the contrary opinion, learn about where that's coming from.
Yes.
And yun na nga,
And
look
also
for that
learn-
common ground
Yeah.
and see how we can live with each other even with our differences.
Yeah.
And respect that, di ba? So, bottom line nga sa akin is the respect siguro, the level of respect that we have for each other. And you lose respect when you know that you can't stomach this person for what he's doing or saying anymore. And he's just going on in his merry way thinking that all of us don't know when we already have told him that we do know, and you're already out of line. But there's no learning and there's no acquiescing to it, to the fact that they're doing wrong or saying wrong things or on the
I
wrong
think
side
one of the most difficult things is to accept is that we are all creatures of our own respective times, di ba? We are all creatures also of the people who brought us up. We are all creatures of decades upon decades of being brought up with certain values and certain belief systems. And even your internal values, di ba? Your own moral compass, you're also a product of something that you kinikimkim mo sa loob mo, pinaniniwalaan mo sa loob mo over decades and decades. And therefore, one of the hardest things I think, for people to accept is lahat tayo merong gustong sabihin. We will not settle this in 1 hour. Di ba? We will not come to an agreement in 15 minutes, in 1 hour. It's like this, parang you also have to, people also, not accept. I don't think we should accept that we will never come to terms. But I think we all should recognize that in many, many things, we will not settle this in 1 hour.
No.
You will not convince
No.
me
No,
now,
yeah.
and I will not
And
convince
that's okay.
you.
We can live with our differences, right? But there has to be there will have to be certain things that we will agree on, maybe not Gaza. that will have a direct impact on our lives. For example, yun na nga, who do we vote for? Who will we choose as our leaders? I mean, these are the things we're just going to
But
have
we're
to
not going to agree on that either.
Yeah, I know, but that's why there's a vote. And whether you like it or not, whoever wins, you're just going to have to do your best to, diba, hope and pray that it will all turn out, and you take it one day at a time, diba? The differences will not die down, but there has to be a willingness nga to learn, to see whether you're already on the wrong side of history. You know what I mean? Parang sa akin, parang ano ba talagang tama dito? The fact that you're even voting, diba, there's always a risk that you might be voting for the wrong person. There is always a risk, right? But you're just going to have to acknowledge the risk. I have voted badly. But, well, bumawi ako because I acknowledge that I voted badly. And I think that people ought to know that. Wag na yung diba? Wag na yung panindigan mo pa kaya. Hindi na. You have to be humbled enough to see nga na mali ako doon. Ay, oo nga, mali pala yun. We shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
Mali. I supported that. Sayang.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you move on knowing it humbles you eh.
So lahat pala to ng pinag-usapan natin, I'm speaking with Luce Cruz Valdez, the head of News 5. Boss ko na hindi ko na napakilala. But just going back to something, the first thing you said before we end this program, is that we talked about your own biases, your own value sets, your own really strong emotion. And we talked about, I've had to keep all of this in check throughout my career. Di ba? So ito yung example ng, pagka pala bigyan ka ng konting puwang, ilalabas mo talaga lahat. Ilalabas mo talaga lahat.
Kasi nga, 2 taon na lang naman.
You heard it.
There are certain benefits that come to you with age, you know? Parang pagbigyan nyo na matanda na. And I think I'm beginning to feel that, na parang, galit kayo, pagbigyan nyo na yan, tanda na yan, mawawala na rin yan sa TV. Di ba?
Ayan. Pagbigyan nyo na pa, mawawala.
Pagbigyan nyo na.
Mawawala rin to. Lilipas din to. but I think you've done a great job navigating not just
You
the
do
politics,
best you
not
can.
just the country, not just the world, but I think navigating yourself, to your point.
Yeah, the most important thing. And parang we all will, I think. We're just going to have to forge on.
Oh, sige.
Ah,
Kakapitan ko na yun habang optimistic yung ano, and hopeful. Di ba? Kakapitan ko na yan. Anyway, Lucy, maraming salamat.
thank you for
really
having me.
enjoy our...
I
hope-
miss these conversations. Thank you for
Okay.
inviting me.
Okay. Catch us again next Saturday at 9 p.m. Philippine Standard Time on One News. You can also check out The Long Conversation on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Ilalabas din po natin to sa Puma Podcast. That's our group. We produce podcasts. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or kung saan man kayo Puma Podcast. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. This is Roundtable.